Hello and welcome to News Desk. I'm Melissa Chan.
And I'm Alex Forrest-Whiting.
This week, we're taking a closer look at the German auto industry. What's wrong with Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz? Because the outlook for Germany's most important industry is not good. In fact, you might have seen the previous live stream on DW. I think it's still running, maybe. I'm not sure. But that just wrapped up the conversation, or is about to wrap up, with German Economic Minister Robert Habeck talking about this very issue of the German auto industry. So here at News Desk, we're asking, is the German car industry doomed?
And we've already had some of your thoughts on that on our community post and also actually in the chat now. Let me just read you some of them. Sarah Mooncake says, it's all about the price. Volkswagen used to be the car for the lower end of middle-income families and individuals. Now it's extremely expensive. Olga Doctor says, crazy prices. Volkswagen is becoming a luxury brand and it's no more the people's car. UGK26 says, too expensive, lack of dependability. That's where I'm at personally. It's not all negative, by the way. We will get on to something positive, but there's quite a lot of this. Nihil Novi says, I worked in the IT department of a big German car manufacturing group. From that perspective, I'd say that incompetence and inefficiency are killing innovation. That's pretty tough. Gibson179 says EVs, that's electric vehicles, of course, will kill the German auto industry. But there is some hope, because this is from Gerhard Pedrico. Apparently, he says the German car industry is going to recover. VW and Mercedes-Benz are going to produce solid-state batteries that they're better than lithium-ion. He says Germany will produce eco-green algae biofuel, and they will transition to EVs. So thanks very much for those comments, and do keep them coming in. Also, if you do have any questions, which we will put to our guests a little bit later.
Yeah, so around the table, we have Nihal Jory, and not in the studio, but working with her in terms of engaging with everyone in chat is Cherry Chan. She's in the control room today. They'll be paying extra attention to the chat. So again, along with Alex, post your questions and comments. And then we have DW's Clifford Coonan from the business team. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but not least, our special guest, Felix Lee. He is a journalist with Süddeutsche Zeitung. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I know I thought you wrote one book about the German car industry, but it looks like you've got two books now under, yes.
Yeah, the second book is not focused on German car industry anymore as my first book. The second book is on Germany's dependency on China.
Yeah, you can hold that up.
Well, of course, car industry plays a major role of it. I mean, we're talking about the second China shock now. The first China shock was a shock which concerned the US, other countries. In the 2000s, when a lot of steel industry went to China and a lot of jobs in the US got lost. The second China shock is hurting Germany because it's about machines and it's about cars.
And we also want to pull up a cover of Felix's first book, right?
Which we can just share my screen. We have a picture of your first book called China, mein Vater und ich, which of course translates to China, my father and I.
Yes.
And I guess you can tell us about the story. I just want to comment on the car. It's a Volkswagen Beetle, which was one of the first cars which became really popular. It was produced for a really long time, and apparently one of the few cars that lasted without major design changes. And so that's quite an iconic image that we see.
Is that your father?
That's my father, yeah. Although the name under it is my name, but it's my father. It's from the 60s in the city of Aachen, where he studied back then. And his dream was, of course, to own a Käfer, a Beetle.
Yeah. So you have Did your father work in the auto industry, or is that?
Exactly. He's from China, went to Taiwan, fled to Taiwan, and from Taiwan he went to study in Germany because he wanted to study, that was in the 60s, motor. And back then, interesting, nobody, not even in Detroit, you could study or focus on motor, because everyone back then thought no motor is already developed. There's nothing to explore anymore. It was about how get cars bigger and bigger, and but not about motor, because they said gas was not and energy was not a, at that time nobody thought that would become a problem. And Aachen was the only place. So he went to Aachen to study. Of course, Germany, when you study in Germany, for a foreigner, it's also no fee. But that's where why he went to Germany. And then later he started as an engineer at Volkswagen in the beginning of 70s in Wolfsburg. That's why I'm born.
In Wolfsburg.
In Wolfsburg, yeah. That's why the title, the subtitle is The Rise of a Superpower, and what family the Lee family has to from Wolfsburg has to do with it. That's the
fascinating.
Because that is a whole city in Germany which is dedicated to Volkswagen.
It is the Volkswagen city,
Yeah,
the
amazing.
headquarters, because it was founded by Adolf Hitler, this city, in 1938.
Wow.
And because to establish Volkswagen was a state-owned company back then. And until now, this city only exists because of Volkswagen. And that's where I grew up.
Amazing. So when we say that we have the experts, I mean, we have the experts for you to ask questions about the German auto industry in a way that I think we rarely get the chance to. So thank you so much. I have a lot more questions about that. But just to kick things off, Alex, I know that you have been preparing for a poll just to get everyone engaged in the chat.
With the help of Cherry, who you don't see, but she's in the background. The poll that we are asking, or the question that we're asking that you will have already seen on your screens, would you still buy a German car? There are three choices. Yes, they are still the best. Maybe if they were cheaper, or no, there are better alternatives. So do vote. It will be really interesting, and I will find it quite enjoyable to know what the results are for that, and we can talk about it towards the end of this stream. So please do vote. That would be great. And also get your questions coming in, please, to Felix and to Clifford.
For sure. And we're also going to do a little something different today. Just for the next few minutes, I thought we'd try to play a game with everyone in the chat. You can follow along. They're going to post the link. But it's called, Can You Tell Which Electric Vehicle is Chinese? And I know the topic of our show is about the German auto industry, but as you'll see, it's very much connected to the Chinese auto industry and also to Chinese consumers. So I know, Nehal, that you've been actually tasked with running this game. Yeah. So what do you have for us?
Okay, so very brief context that everybody needs, which is that China's, of course, been producing electric vehicles for a long time. The Chinese government actually started investing in related technologies as early as 2001. But the reason people wouldn't buy them was because there was this reputation of cheap in cost and cheap in quality. And so people really stayed away from, or at least car enthusiasts weren't as much into buying Chinese EVs. Now, these cars have improved to such a large extent that I bet if you look at these pictures, you cannot tell the difference between, is it a Chinese EV, is it from somewhere else, is it European? So that's the game created by Bloomberg, which is a UK-based news outlet. And I'm going to show you 5 pictures. Everyone has to guess, is this a Chinese EV or not? And I'll tell you if it is.
It's a little unfair advantage. I have a feel like Felix would win, would win this.
Maybe
All
not.
right. Maybe not.
Okay, that's the first one. Oh, do you see my screen? No?
There we go.
Okay,
There we go.
Nice wheels.
I'll say yes. I just don't know why. That's my gut.
It's
a head fake, right?
if it's Chinese, yeah.
You think it is, do
I
you?
think it's Chinese.
It is definitely Chinese.
I'm going with what Felix says. And why is it definitely? Because you know this.
It's so future-looking. And you know, I just had a friend who went to China and he said, when you look at a German car now, it looks so old-fashioned. Because all these EV from China, they look so futuristic.
Is it because they're new models, so they're creating from scratch, and they have this concept of...
Yeah, and it's, I mean, electric engine, and it's so much easier. And the Chinese companies are so much more flexible to to create new cars, new designs than the Germans are. Just an example, for Volkswagen, this is already fast. It takes 40 months to create a new car and bring it to the market.
40.
40. BYD needs 18 months.
BYD.
BYD, the Chinese leading
Build your
Chinese EV car company. So they're so much faster, so much more, and they can do it to a much lower price. That means they are also more creative and flexible. When people don't like this design, doesn't matter. 18 months later, there will be a new one.
Yeah.
Wow.
They also have to.
So
they
is he right though? Is Felix?
Okay, so you're guessing Chinese EV, yes?
Yeah.
You are correct. And it is actually.
And I have to just say congratulations to Quinn Lin, who said the same. Carolina said the same. Who else said the same? Various others also said that they thought that it was Chinese. Congratulations, you're correct. I just went with what Felix said.
Yeah. Yeah. And Clifford, you had something to say.
There's another important point about this is that there's 200 electric vehicle manufacturers in China, which means they have to be futuristic. You have to have something that sets you apart from all the other companies. And that can be the looks and this wonderful design of that car that we've just seen, but also the price, because you're competing with price. And I mean, that's maybe an issue we can discuss later in the program about how that will shake out. But right now, it's a very, very competitive market.
All right.
And you were right, this is a BYD as well, which stands for Build Your Dreams.
Apparently, yes.
And it has a pretty cool looking panoramic roof that we can't see in this picture. But from what I've heard, if you had that in a German car, it would make it really expensive. And
Okay, next up then.
Okay.
What do we have?
all right, this is the second one.
Oh, that looks European, but
Wow.
I think
That
I'm still going to go with Chinese.
I think it does look Chinese.
Look at the little wheels with
but
the
hang
little
on,
round
I'm looking at Felix.
Felix is-
Felix
It
is
could
shaking.
be Italian, but I still would say it's Chinese.
You think it's
because
Chinese? Okay.
they're so experimental at the moment, the Chinese, because of there's so many of them, and they try to be competitive and try out new things. The Europeans wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Interesting that you say that.
I'm wrong.
Wait, so you're going for Chinese?
Yeah.
Oh, but hang on,
think I'm wrong.
hang on. Timon Schroeder says European Citroen, question mark.
Okay.
I'm just saying. It's French, says Jerem. Oh, can't they read a logo?
Oh, well,
Is there
the
a
logo's-
logo?
it's a
Please
little
zoom
My
in.
glasses are bad.
Okay, so what do we have?
Oh, so
Yeah, that's correct. Well, we
that's
guessed
the
Chinese
Citroën.
EV,
Yeah, it's got
right?
the.
It is a French company.
Okay,
Yes.
it's French.
And strictly speaking, it's not really a car. It's what they call a quadricycle. So it's somewhere between a bicycle and a passenger
Smart cars
car.
and
But
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Made
didn't
in
see the Citroën
Okay, yeah.
chevrons on
Yeah.
the. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
okay, here's
Oh, that's
the third
an
one.
inside look. You see, I can't recognize the logo. Maybe Felix can.
I
but,
cannot. My glasses are too bad.
There we go. I'm going to say it's Chinese again. I'm just going to keep guessing
Is that
Chinese.
Tesla? Is that not Chinese?
Maybe. No, it's not.
I'm going to
can't
say
see.
not Chinese,
Okay.
but I'm just.
Clifford.
I'm going to go with not Chinese.
Okay.
Okay. Which is correct.
Oh, what is
This
it?
one is from Sweden,
Oh,
although a
Sweden.
lot of the production is done in China, but it's a Swedish company.
Okay.
But Polestar.
Oh, Polestar, and look,
It's
look,
Chinese?
everyone
Is
in the
Chinese?
chat is.
Oh, it's owned by a Chinese company. See, this is where it gets complicated. When we ask about whether the German car industry is doomed, I think there's complications.
Swedish
with
most
ownership.
famous car brand Volvo is
Yeah.
Chinese now.
Yeah.
Yes, of
It's
course.
Chinese now, and
The car maker's based in Sweden. Yeah.
And everyone in the chat is much faster than we are. Clearly have proper glasses
Yeah, we
on
have
so
some
they can see.
experts.
Because they've all said Polestar, and
Polestar,
half Chinese, half Swedish, says Quinlan again. So, as do others. So, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you,
cool.
everyone. You're all very clever.
I think we should do one more, and then we should really get into the meat of things from Felix and Clifford.
Are we going to win an e-car at the end? Ask you, Freighties.
Yeah, I'm going to send an NFT of a car. That's what you get. Just kidding.
Okay, let's do another interior.
Oh,
just
okay.
for
She's
comparison.
deciding which one to show us.
Is this Chinese EV or not?
Oh,
But that looks like a Tesla. I'm going to say it's a Tesla. It's not Chinese.
It is, I think it's Chinese.
Oh.
I'm going with what Felix says.
Why do you say that?
Because, again, this futuristic look, if a German car maker would make it, it would be unpayable.
Yeah.
The Chinese would do it. Tesla, I'm not sure if they are so advanced as this.
Oh, okay.
is.
I've seen
Maybe
some
they are,
interiors
but I
where
would
they've
say
got
it's a
like.
Chinese
So what are you
luxury
saying?
brand.
Are we saying yes or no?
He's saying Chinese.
Chinese.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
see.
It's correct. It's another BYD.
Another
There we
BYD.
go.
And it's known for having a relatively small battery, so it's considered one of the most
Advanced.
green cars available in Europe at the moment.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
That
no
was super interesting.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, again, part of the point of it is to show the complexity of the global car industry, how far Chinese vehicles have come for those who might not have been following. And also, like, ownership is going to be a very interesting thing. So I think just to kick things off, big question for both Clifford and Felix. What are some of the biggest reasons the German auto industry is struggling? And when we talk about struggling, what are we actually talking about? Because they are still profitable. So maybe Clifford first.
Well, one of the big reasons is, I mean, I'll tell you a story from when I was living in China. I had a friend from East Germany who, when the wall came down, he set up a business in China, and he used the money to buy a Mercedes because he wanted to buy a Mercedes. There were no Mercedes in China at the time, so he brought it in, and he was very proud of it. And one day it broke down, and he brought it into the service station to get it fixed into the garage, and they said, "Yeah, sure, we can fix it. We can fix it." And he came back the next day, and it was gone, and the garage was gone.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
So
This is early days.
the only people who wanted Mercedes more than the East Germans were the Chinese at that point, right? So he found it eventually. I mean, it's kind of stood out in Beijing because it was the only one. But this shows that there was a huge desire for Mercedes and for German cars and for Audi, which started it, and Volkswagen, which started it in China back in the 80s. But in the 4 decades since then, everything has changed completely because we've seen a lot of things. We've seen how they've absorbed so much technology in China from the Western car makers. And they've also been able to benefit from a lot of other things. We've had, subsidies, which is a big issue, which I'm sure we'll be talking about as well. So it's just been such a
subsidies, as in subsidies in China to support the domestic car industry there.
That's right,
Got
yeah.
it.
And for the car manufacturers, but also right across the supply chain, because you got subsidies for mining to bring up the materials, you've got cheap labor, you've got all of these kind of things that whereas Germany has gone the other direction. And if in terms of its prices have risen, and in order to take advantage of the low costs, it's gone to China. So a combination of all these different things and other factors, I'm sure, as Felix will point out.
Okay, Felix.
Yeah, there were 2 major mistakes by the German car companies and especially Volkswagen. The one mistake was, I remember 2017, I was also based in China as a correspondent, and we talked to the Volkswagen chief from in China, and the Chinese government said, okay, every 10th car has to be an EV, a new electric vehicle or hybrid, which are sold in China, has to be electric. And the Chinese car companies complained, the German car companies, everyone complained. Similar to what we hear here
Right.
at the moment.
And in the US.
Batteries are not good enough.
Yeah.
There's not enough stations where you can charge, not enough charging stations. So it's the same complaints. And we asked the VW representative, and he said, yeah, all the plans for electric exist, but we would be stupid to start selling electric cars when combustion engines are sold so well. And until then, they made a huge profit, the German car companies. Now, 5 years later, every second car which is sold is electric.
Every second in China.
Every second now.
Wow.
In China, that
and
is.
the Germans are not the number ones anymore. And this is because China in these 5 years was doing their homework. We thought, even in China, everyone was it was a pandemic, and there was not much developing happening. Everyone was concerned about the pandemic. No, China did his homework in this time. Charging is not an issue anymore, at least in the big cities.
Right.
And the batteries. I mean, BYD, CATL, they have batteries now 800 kilometers, with a range of 800 kilometers.
Because BYD originally started out as a battery,
battery company,
not a car
exactly.
company. That I do know. And that was when Warren Buffett at the time invested in BYD, attracted a lot of attention because he was betting on the battery technology. That's what's driving, no pun intended, the success of this car company.
And this, as you mentioned, it started already in the 2000 of years when they already started to put more emphasis on battery. They knew that would be the future or the most important technology for a future car. And so China's government helped to save all these wineries worldwide to get lithium. And the second, they put a lot of effort in development into batteries. And now, all of a sudden, 5 years later, they are ahead. And they can do it much cheaper, much more efficient.
Right.
And the second misjudgment, of course, was how important digitalization is. I mean, we're talking about there are 200 car companies. 180 of them are too many of them. If you want to want to survive, it's not about how good the engine is. The big question is what software, what digital gadgets you have in the car for
Inside the car, right?
consumers.
Right.
This is how they decide to buy a car. Because engine, it's not a problem anymore. It's not an issue anymore. It's all about what extra gadgets they have. And the Germans, they said, do we need a karaoke machine in the car?
A karaoke machine.
There's some of them even have karaoke machines.
That's already an attraction for me.
But digitalization was never, the Germans were never strong in that. And maybe also a misjudgment was Volkswagen thought we can do our own software, and they failed.
Yeah.
And now they need the help of the Chinese software companies or the American software companies
to help them.
out. And this is also, of course, I mean, for 40 years, the Germans were the one who looked down and the Chinese were looking up. And now it's vice versa. Now the German needs the help from the Chinese engineers and software developers to get ahead. And this is a big catastrophe for a whole country which was so focused on automotive manufacturing.
The chat is just quite interesting because there's a whole debate going on about what's better, Chinese, German or Japanese cars.
Japanese.
We can't forget that. So I'll leave the chat to it to discuss that while we continue. But just flagging up, that's what lots of people are talking about at the moment.
And just very quickly, where do German automakers sell most of their cars outside of Germany? Is China the biggest market? Biggest market.
China.
But it's diminishing, you say, as
it
a
is
share
diminishing,
of
but it's still. I mean, China is the most important and biggest auto market in the whole world. It's bigger than the U.S. So when we talk about which technology will take over, this will not be decided in Germany, not decided in Europe. It will be decided in China. Because it is the most important. And technology-wise, all the developing is happening in China now. And until recently, Volkswagen has 39 factories where they are involved in China.
In China.
Almost every second car which, until recently, which Volkswagen sold was in China. So they are so dependent on the Chinese market. And we can debate as much as we want in Germany which engine will make the run. It's not our decision in Germany. It's a decision by the Chinese because this is the most important market.
And just very quickly, I mean, I think a lot of people in chat already know this, but maybe there's a few people who might not know. I mean, Volkswagen is the umbrella company for a lot of major brands. I mean, could we shoot off a few other, like they own Audi, right?
Audi, Porsche, Skoda, Seat, which used to be or Cupra now, Cupra, and
so quite a number of big ones,
big names,
yeah.
And this whole, when you go in Shanghai, just at the edge of the city, this whole when this was all exploding 20 years ago, when it really started to take off, there were schools just for engineers coming from Germany. It was whole villages and towns that were just full of, you know, people who were working in this burgeoning industry. It was incredible to see. You know, and just now everyone's talking about whether this is the Nokia moment, like with Nokia mobile phones, right?
Yeah.
What do you
Nokia had such dominance in the mobile phone market globally, and then suddenly it just disappeared because other
they
Chinese
stopped innovating. They stopped.
I mean, the iPhone came along. That was the big innovation, but also the Chinese producers had a big impact on that. And of course, the iPhone was being made in China at the time. Or the Kodak moment, the way everyone used to have Kodak cameras, and then suddenly it's all on the phones, you know. And now people are saying that a once treasured German concept, you know, this idea that Germany was the best car maker in the world, and it was, and you know, in many ways it still is, but it's the market has changed completely, and I think the speed at which it's happened has taken everyone by surprise.
But they're still profitable. I mean, that was one question I had. They're still profitable. It's just that in the medium term, I mean, because, for example, I mean, the most recent thing is Volkswagen is kind of suggested pretty much heavily that they will start cutting jobs.
which is the first time which is happening.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because the German Volkswagen people who worked for Volkswagen, they thought this is for lifetime, and this is also not only their lifetime, but the second and the third generation. So we never had this in Germany, in Wolfsburg, where they really would lay off workers.
and we're seeing some pictures of union protests in response to management saying that they're going to cut jobs. This was just last week, it looks like. So, yeah, people aren't happy.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, unlike Nokia, which was just, I would say, just smartphones, it's with the German cars, a whole country depends on car industry, and we're not talking only about Volkswagen, which is the biggest, and we're not only talking about Mercedes and BMW. We're talking about all these we're talking about Bosch. We're talking about ZF.
So what are these companies? Sorry, just to explain.
Suppliers,
Car parts, then.
car parts, and
Got it.
I always thought we were only talking about Wolfsburg, Stuttgart, and Munich. No, we're talking a whole southwest
Supply
of
chain.
Germany, the whole huge parts of West Germany and South Germany. They all depend on the car industry, and even when we look at the machinery, which is the second strong industry in Germany, even they depend on the car industry. So this has major impact, and this is why I think if it really turns out that the German car makers won't make it in China, that will be a disaster for Germany, which until now is the third largest economy in the world. But it is a real shock what's happening.
Sorry,
So I just wanted, just on that, do you think they will actually go that far and close factories in Germany? Do you think the CEO will be able to put that in place, given the backlash, not just from the unions, but also the Workers' Council, also politically? I mean, it's the government. I mean, it's partly owned. VW is partly owned by the state of Lower Saxony, isn't it? So how do you think they will be able to put any of this in place, given the serious concern that there is within Germany about what's about to happen to their biggest industry?
I think it's uninevitable, and that has not only to do with the Chinese market, that they are struggling so bad in China. electric engine is a much more simple technology than combustion. Maybe in 100 years, or we look back industry history and we thought, what a mistake. 100 years, electric engines, we had this already in the 19th century. If we had developed it further, we would never have wasted so much.
The combustion.
And because it's a much easier technology. The Chinese are now on this, Tesla is on this. And you don't need so much engineers and so much workers to build an electric car. So only looking at this, it is uninventable. And now that they are losing so much market share, will have more impact on the German car makers. And the third thing is there will be there's much money is needed to be competitive in China again. So they have to put. We're talking about billions to invest in engineering, and they have to do it in China. So a lot of money is now needed to invest in China so they can keep up with the Chinese competitors.
And then meanwhile, I mean, Clifford, I don't know if you have any insight, but has it been a true level playing field for German automakers in China? Or does the Chinese government provide assistance to their domestic companies? I mean, is this an issue? Because some people are saying it's unfair.
It's a big issue at the moment, and actually the European Union this week is going to vote on putting tariffs to try and on Chinese cars, Chinese imports, to try and level these playing fields. The problem, I think, definitely with China, it is heavily subsidized and it cuts right across the supply chain. As I was saying earlier, that it's at every level in society. It's an industrial policy. And you don't get industrial policy on that scale anywhere else in the world. So there's a sort of an ability to manage everything. BYD is a private company, but it's very heavily linked with Shenzhen and the area around in Guangdong, and how it kind of functions at every level. It's essentially a battery company, and what they're doing is selling batteries, but they're either encased in a car or a bus or. It's basically like so many industries in China. It's a very different approach to what we have in Western industries. So this week we have this vote in the EU to try and level the playing fields, and it'll be interesting to see how that does, because it's trying another level, just to what Felix was saying, talking about German strengths about engineering and things like that. To go back to those kind of strengths is very, very important, I think, because they still exist.
But I'm very confused. I mean, my understanding is, I'm actually going to play a comment from Robert Habeck, the economic minister of Germany, not from this afternoon, but just from a few days ago, in terms of Germany's position concerning these EU-wide tariffs that they're discussing and they're going to take a vote on. Have a listen, and then we'll pick up from there.
Ich glaube, es ist in der Tat belegt.
I think it is indeed proven that China is artificially increasing overcapacity with subsidies in order to take over markets, to take them over aggressively. Nevertheless, I am not a fan of tariffs, of countervailing duties, because that will probably lead to countermeasures and will involve us in a tariff dispute, perhaps a tariff war with China. So I urge political solution, and that was very much in line with the ladies and gentlemen I just talked to.
Mit den Damen und Herren dort eben in dieser Runde.
So I'm a little confused, actually. I always have been, because Germany's position appears to be that they don't want to slap tariffs on Chinese vehicles coming into the EU. And everybody else in Europe, with automakers in Italy and France, support this. But the German automakers, who would benefit from the tariffs, at least in the European continent, don't want this. What's going on? I assume this is being tied to their businesses in China.
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone in being baffled by this. It's kind of remarkable. If you look at how the tariffs in the US were sold as protecting US industry, bringing production home, all of it as a positive force. And in other European countries, they see this as a way of trying to make things fair again, to bring about a level playing field. But Germany has annoyed the G7, it's annoyed all of its partners. it's just because to protect this essentially dying industry as in its current form. I mean, I don't believe that the German car industry will die out, but I think in its current form, it's going to need massive changes. And instead of trying to help in a way to make, it's afraid of China. It's worried what's going to happen, and that somehow China will retaliate in a way that it can't afford. But it's alone in this. And so when this vote happens on Friday about trying to bring in these tariffs to make things this level playing field, Germany has been putting pressure on other European partners to stop this, and if it's causing a major problem in the EU and has longer-term repercussions.
But isn't sorry, I was just going to say, isn't part of the problem that this whole thing about that there is so many of these German companies are using, as you said before, China to make products that are sold not just in China, but also parts that are coming back here. So it's going to hurt German companies as well.
Not so much, because the amount of German cars who are produced in China to get them imported to Europe is not big. But of course, the German car makers are afraid of countermeasures from the Chinese side. And then, unlike GM in the US, unlike Renault or Peugeot, German car makers still have a big market share in China. GM is pretty much out. Chrysler, they're out of China. So they have not much to lose anymore. The Germans are. But somehow I think it's still also sort of a game. I mean, because the vote on Friday, the majority of the European countries already said they are pro the tariffs. And Germany cannot stop it anymore. But as BMW now asked Germany, please still vote against it. So the Germans can show, at least to the Chinese side, we were against it and please don't hurt us. I think so. Maybe it is sort of a game, and the Germans do know that these tariffs will come.
Very interesting.
But this is Europe's biggest economy, though. I mean, the thing about this is it's a game, certainly, and it is this, But this is Europe's biggest economy, saying we don't want to offend the Chinese government, which is pretty incredible.
We have got quite a lot of questions about China in particular and about these EV cars. One thing I just want to quickly ask, Felix, is there any car not fully Chinese these days? That's asked by The Genre.
I think there are. I mean,
You think?
I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure.
US automakers, maybe.
But especially the premium German car makers, they're very proud that they get all their
What, like
things from
Lamborghini, you mean? Made by VW, by the way, in the list.
I'm thinking of some Mercedes. I'm not sure. I cannot answer. But the thing is, less and less German parts are needed in China.
Right.
That's a much bigger problem, because it used to be for a long time that not only German cars which were produced in China, but a lot of parts were produced in Germany or from German companies, and they're less and less needed. So we're not only talking about the big German car brands who are in trouble, but also to the suppliers and the machineries.
Mr. Moon asks, what percentage are Chinese EVs on German roads? And then somebody else replied, actually, saying that they thought it was about 1%, but I don't know.
You have something, right?
Yeah. Interesting numbers for that. We have some data from the international... Oh, my bad. Yeah, can we share my screen, please?
Well,
okay.
1%?
I'll walk us through... Oh, sorry. Okay. So we have to look at the second column. That's cars in Germany. And then we're looking at BEVs, which is battery-based electric vehicles. 8% were Chinese cars. And 41% are still made in Germany. But it's quite different when you look on China's side.
8% of EVs, right?
Yeah.
Oh, in the Chinese side, that's 67% of battery EVs are domestic.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason why there are not many Chinese cars on German
roads
roads
actually
yet,
for a little longer on screen for the people in chat. Yeah, let's do that.
the reason is that there are not many because until recently they had problems to transport so many cars from China to Germany. BYD is building these giga container ships now. They are already building it, so they are pretty much on their way. The problem is China has created huge overcapacities in electronic. We're talking about, there used to be 500 EV car brands in China, and 400 of them already are bankrupt. But still, they created overcapacities for 50 million cars in China. Of course, the Germans are part of this, and only half of them are sold in China. So
They have to get rid of the
US
rest.
already closed the market, Japan closed the market, Turkey closed the market, Canada closed the market for the Chinese cars. The Europeans haven't until yet. So they're just waiting to come to Europe. And when this is happening, we don't know how much the Chinese car will be sold until then, but what we can tell, it's much, much cheaper than what the German competitors will do. And I'm not sure until now, there's a huge loyalty for car buyers to stick to German cars. But there was a huge loyalty to German brands in China too, and now it vanished. And I'm not sure if it's still same can happen in Germany when it's so much cheaper.
Do you think Germans will abandon German cars? I mean, it's such a point of pride.
Yeah, but I mean, the German, the Volkswagen ID.3 Pro is at the moment still around 40,000. They will lower the price now to 30,000.
I think we have some footage of the ID.
3, yeah. But a similar car, BYD, sold in China for 10,000. So just 1/4 of the price. And to be honest, the software is better than in the German version.
Just to pick up on that, Marty Tube says it's hard to make cheaper cars, as in Germany and in Europe, if the labour costs 10 times as much as it does in China. That's a point that's being picked up quite a bit. There are more questions about Chinese cars. And also just one thing I do just want to add, because somebody has said this several times, criticising the Chinese the batteries that have come out of China. Apparently they were using a BMW vehicle, and then there was a big fire in South Korea. I don't know if you know anything about it, but this person keeps bringing it up, saying what China was using and what they gave BMW, it wasn't as good as what they could have had. Do you know anything about that? Just because he's asked it several times.
I'd like to, just to take it as a general point, I mean, you're talking about labour costs and safety standards and all of these things. There are efforts now from Europe to make the level playing fields, not just with the tariffs, but also even within the German car industry, they're saying that if the Chinese they should have to manufacture in Europe with using European standards, European wages, European working conditions, all of these things, because they got an unfair advantage because they don't follow EU norms when it comes to a lot of car production. And then you have things like safety issues, like there's been a number of I don't know the details for a lot of the incidents that are mentioned, but the broader point about safety concerns is there because of different kinds of standards applying. Now, obviously, if they're coming into Europe, they have to meet certain standards. But it's still a big part of the whole level playing fields.
Yeah.
I just want to actually pull up an interesting video that we found. Actually, does the control room have it, or you have it, Nehal?
I have it as well.
Let's show it on your.
Thinking of the YouTubers.
Yes, because even in Germany, what's really fascinating is there are German YouTubers who. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe remove the volume.
Wow, Daniel Hallmeyer. We're giving him a little bit of a ad space here, but he's German and he is reviewing 2 cars, a German car, BMW, and a BYD. And this is all over YouTube. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are watching this. And he's breaking it down in terms of a review. And you can tell, like, the BYD car is really futuristic looking. I can see that already.
That's the panoramic roof I was talking about.
That's the rooftop. That's so expensive,
yes.
Yes, and that's pretty expensive for BYD, no? 50,000?
But wait for the price of the other one.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Let me see if I can.
So that's the BMW, and they're both EVs.
No, that's just
That's
the,
definitely not the price.
No, 600.
That's just the addition. This is the.
Oh,
70
20,000.
It's about 30,000 more.
So 70,800 euros
Yeah.
for people who can't see that.
And then you have to do a lot of modifications if you
Right.
want it to look exactly like the
yeah.
other one.
Just the basic price.
I mean, now, of course, we're looking at two luxury cars, and Chinese luxury cars are also not cheap. The problem is in the price politics the German car makers went. They thought, okay, yeah, when we build electric cars, they are more modern. We can have at least the same price as a combustion, but or sell it even more expensive. The Chinese don't think that way. They know how much easier and cheaper it is to build an electric car. And so what the German car makers did, and that was also one of the wrong decisions, they wanted to sell, when they went into electronic, they want to sell high-end cars. They don't have much in the mid and below range. And this is where the Chinese are strong now. So
Yeah.
we should look at the little ones. The Chinese, they're not very good looking. But this is what the mass of people are buying. And this is what is missing in Europe at the moment, or is missing from Volkswagen. Now Volkswagen all of a sudden said, yeah, we will bring out also a mid-range or a lower price electric car.
But it's
electric
too
vehicle.
late.
But it will take 3-4 years. And this is a long time, looking at how fast the speed of developing is happening in China now.
Can I ask to what extent the German automakers are struggling, in part because I don't know if this has to do with the German government and their inability to roll out the infrastructure for charging stations. In the United States, especially in the state of California, where I'm from, they've been very, very aggressive, working with Tesla in some cases, or some of the other U.S. automakers actually working with Tesla for sharing the stations and the technology. I'm walking around all over Europe, and I'm just not seeing any charging stations in the same way. Is this also the fault of the German government?
It is. It is. But of course, it is because there was politics. The governments only react when the pressure is big enough, and there was no pressure yet. People in Europe, they said, we don't need electric cars, or only very few people. So the big mistake was by the companies themselves. And looking at Volkswagen, it was under Winterkorn, who is now in court at the moment. The diesel scandal in 2015. In his era, Volkswagen put all his efforts in diesel engines.
That's what they bet on.
Yeah. And they had no alternatives when the diesel scandal came out. Back at that time, Toyota had hybrid, Tesla was coming up, and the Chinese were coming up.
Yeah.
And now, 9 years later, there's still not a big alternative, because they were battled all on diesel and they had no alternative.
What happened? I mean, German innovation used to seem to exist. Everything I'm hearing over the past 30 minutes or so is both the government and the automakers sort of reacting to things and never being ahead of the curve. I'm a little confused about how they lost their sort of game, just on that. One thing you said early on really got me, which is that the Chinese government literally told the German automakers, we are going to go big on EVs. And anyone who knows anything about China knows that if the state decides to do something, it's an authoritarian country, it's going to happen. So did these people who've worked in China, these German companies with a presence in China for 2 decades, just decide to ignore everything they know about China? I mean, I'd love both your thoughts.
Yeah, complete miscalculation. I mean, it was not only that the Chinese government said, okay, every 10th car which is sold has to be electric, but also, you all probably also remember, Beijing was overcrowded with cars, and then you only could get a what do you call it, a number plate, a license plate by lottery.
Wow.
And then they said, and it was hardly, when you wanted to get a license, it was, I think, 1 to 80 or something. So it was hardly possible to get a new license plate except if you buy an electric car. And this should have been a clear sign for all the German managers to know where the direction is going. It's not only, oh, please, the Chinese want, hope that the Chinese consumers buy electric. It was forced by the government. Yeah. Only if you buy an electric car, you get a license plate right away. Otherwise, you won't. Yeah. So this was a clear sign. And I'm surprised. Maybe the problem in Germany is that, or the German car makers, they had a too good time because they made so much money profit in China with combustion engines. Yeah. And they couldn't imagine how fast the development would go and that they would miss this turning point because and to be honest, they're still selling combustion. And it's not that China, whole China is electric now. Chinese government also said we want electric, especially in the cities, in the countryside, and 60% of the people still live in the countryside. They still need combustion.
Yeah, and
for long distance.
And that is picked up by AB. When we were talking about the charging points just then that we were referring to, I'd like to point out it might be in Western countries that there are charging points, but in most Asian and African countries there are no charging points. So still German cars have an upper hand there. Is what they are pointing out. And many more points on Chinese EVs. Did you want to come in? Sorry, because I've got a
Yeah, just to agree with that. I mean, I think that corporations think in quarterly terms, and the Chinese government thinks in I don't. It's a cliche, but it's certainly 5-year plans.
Yes.
And they didn't listen because they're making money every quarter, and it's continuing to grow because the market is expanding. But there was a lack of recognition of what direction the market was going, despite all this input, despite the fact that the pollution had to be resolved because it was potentially destabilizing the government, which means that something had to change. And for some reason, they didn't listen. And this is now, it's payback time now. And we have 200 car makers now in China.
190 too many?
Yeah.
Even the Chinese government says too many. Really? The question is only from the 1 dozen who will survive, will the German car companies be under it? That is a big question.
I mean, maybe you can see Volkswagen, Toyota, Hyundai, and maybe 10 Chinese car companies in, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. These things are happening so fast that the way we used to predict things happening in the auto industry don't really work anymore because it's just so fast moving.
Just a point. Sorry. Just say this, just a point made by Casey Liu. The Chinese government, this is alluding to the 200 EV Chinese companies. Chinese government is running out of money. Exporting EVs is their only hope for their economy. Exactly. With all the tariffs on Chinese EVs, you've just talked about that earlier, the government subsidies will be stopped and the Chinese EV is then done, is what this person is saying, Casey Liu. But that is a big issue, isn't it, about the dumping, so-called?
The overcapacities which are created in China is a huge problem also for China itself. Definitely, and there will be the battle is at the moment is happening, the price battle, but still we shouldn't underestimate that among these few or 200, there are some very good.
Yeah, it's a numbers game at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. And we know that from China, right? This is how China works. I mean, they create overcapacity and there's a huge disruption. But at the end, some of them will survive and they are excellent.
Yeah, like the solar industry. Nehal, I know you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to step back and just sort of ask, why was China so driven? Why is it that they put their sort of bets behind EVs, yeah.
Well, I think again, it was the battery industry was very important. It was cheap. They had to do something about pollution because it was becoming destabilizing in the cities. It was also, it's lower tech, so it's easier. A lot of time China was trying to buy these expensive powertrains from European car makers that they could use to develop cars, but it was for them, it was a possibility to kind of build something themselves, a domestic industry itself. And this idea of massive number of companies producing something happens in a lot of different industries in China, even in the e-bikes. You remember the e-bikes a few years ago?
They were everywhere.
They were everywhere. And it was millions, and they cost nothing.
And they were all
even
from
though each of
China.
them, and they're all from China, and then within months of this happening, they were being hailed as the super champion industries of the world. And I think there's maybe 2 or 3 companies doing it now.
Most of them weren't profitable.
Yeah, they never made profit. It was all investment, and then you had these huge stockpiles of in trash dumps of these bikes, which were a massive environmental disaster actually. Yeah. And there's talk at the moment that this is happening in the e-vehicle sector in China too, because this capacity isn't going at the moment. They can't send it anywhere. They're trying to send it to Europe, but it's not clear whether they're going to be able to. And a lot of the existing production anyway has been scrapped because it's only in the last couple of years that these things were developed. But they've gotten a lot better. But there's a lot of nobody wants the bad stuff from 2 years ago.
Actually, at the moment, only 3 car companies selling electric cars are profitable. This is Tesla, it's BYD, and it's Lease Auto.
Which auto?
Lease
Okay.
lease car.
Yeah.
Because of these overcapacity China has created, and this is sort of this blamed to the system, because when the government says something, we want to go in this direction, and this is happening with a lot of key industries, then every city government, every provincial government is building up their own factory.
Yeah.
And of course, this is too many of them. But now what are they going to do with these overcapacities? So I think Europe has no other choice than to regulate somehow. And I think the European Commission was doing it very smart. I mean, the Americans, clearly the Canadians, the Japanese said, we don't want anything of this. So they put 100% tariffs on cars. So they closed the market.
Yeah, there's no BYD in the United
Europeans
States.
sort of leaves a window open to negotiate. And this is what the Europeans want to do. This is, but you have to have something. So I don't understand the German car companies at all. To negotiate with China, and you have to negotiate with China hard, because this is what the Chinese are doing. It's in their blood to negotiate hard. You have to have something. You have to have something to negotiate about. And this is what the European Commission is doing. They didn't say 100% and that's the end of it. They said, okay, we try to differentiate who got more subsidies, more or less, and this is depending the tariffs. And they let the window open to negotiate. And I think they negotiated a little bit, but maybe it didn't turn out. And now the tariffs are probably coming. But still the window is open to negotiate. And I think this is important to do this. But you have to have something. If you don't put tariffs at all, the Europeans have nothing to negotiate about.
I'm right in saying that there's currently a 10% tariff. Is that right?
No, it depends. It's between 18 and 35%, I think.
I know that's what they're thinking of. I thought that's what they were thinking of bringing in. That's what the vote is on. But I thought there was already a smaller one in place.
Depends on. I think, I mean, even there's a few BMWs who are produced in China, and we have to add this. I mean, the German car companies in China are part of the overcapacity problem. I mean, I mentioned 39 fabrics where Volkswagen is involved. So they are part of the problem too. And so even the BMWs who will be re-imported who are produced in China and re-imported to Europe, there will be probably tariffs on, because they also take advantage of the subsidies from the Chinese side. But the EU Commission is trying to look very closely and try to differentiate, and not like with a hammer like the Americans do 100% to everything what comes from China.
There are so many more questions, but I know time is ticking.
No, I mean, we've got a few more minutes.
Okay, well, this is one that has come up twice from 2 different people, and this is to do with the difference between China, which is not a democracy, and Europe, Germany, which is a democracy, and the differences that therefore can mean. Mao Mao says, please discuss functional safety and security, including cybersecurity standards as well, because I would rather spend 10,000 euros extra for it to be more tested. We talked about that before. And then somebody else is just saying, can we talk, please, about it's AB... how much the communist versus democratic economy mindset makes a difference in this whole industry and whether it does.
Those
Not
are
just about
great
the price,
questions.
but they are...
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if either of you maybe...
Yeah.
Well, maybe just,
Clifford and-
I mean, one thing that we've had a lot of debate about TikTok and how the data on TikTok is being stored and possibly stored on Chinese servers and how this could be used against Western powers in the future. A car is a computer on wheels, and your car knows a lot about you. And there's a lot of security issues around allowing Chinese companies to have this much access to the data that is contained within cars. And this means that, I mean, in some of the scenarios, if your bus fleet is Chinese bus fleet, they can stop the bus.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, yeah.
Just to qualify, these are commercial companies that are out to make money.
Sure.
But
there's a lot of them are state-owned. There's a lot of links, and even talking about the US, and it comes down as well to Europe's relationship and to relationships between Western countries. I mean, Germany has annoyed a lot of the other G7 countries with its approach to China, the way it's been way too conciliatory in this way, particularly on areas of security, because if US security officials are nervous about dealing with Germany because they feel that Germany just gives everything away too easily. So there's a security aspect to this, and this, of course, feeds in, as the excellent question said, it becomes a cybersecurity issue. Now, it can look paranoid, but at the same time, we know that there have been cases, TikTok was following Financial Times journalists,
that was real.
Yeah, these are all real issues and a lot of stuff that could be happening that we don't know about. So you can't just dismiss it as paranoia. I think these are genuine security concerns.
And we're already in the middle of it. I mean, we don't have to look in the future. I mean, the German network, telecommunication network, a lot of important parts are still from Huawei. It might change in a few years, but at the moment we are already. And if they do something in the German network, and also in a lot of other European countries, the Chinese government can already turn the switch.
Are they doing anything? Is the EU or Germany doing anything in regards to cybersecurity and car imports?
Not enough.
Not enough?
Definitely not enough, because they still, of course, it would cost money. It will cost, you would have to change a lot. And I mean, look at TikTok. I mean, a lot of people still haven't realized that it's a Chinese app. Interesting, in China it's forbidden.
Yeah, TikTok is banned
in China because the Chinese government doesn't want all these content, which is
it's ironic.
And the Europeans, or not only the Europeans, the Americans, they use TikTok and don't want to, or giving them, it's hard for them to regulate it. It's totally ununderstandable, but this is what's happening. About cars, yes, probably some people would say, okay, we don't want to buy a Chinese car because of the security issues. But as I mentioned TikTok, the majority is using it. And this will probably happen with Chinese cars too.
Yes.
I mean, I have got so many questions.
I think we are kind of near the end, but I wonder if we can check in on the poll.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do that and just see if you guys have any reactions to how people have voted.
So the question was, would you still buy a German car? No. So there were three possible answers. No, there are better alternatives. Maybe if they were cheaper, or yes, they are still the best. So in the order that they won, which won the most votes is what I'm trying to say. No, there are better alternatives, 39%. Maybe if they were cheaper, 36%. Yes, they are still the best, only 24%. So that's what the poll says, 505
so
people
only 20%
voted. Only 24%
for German cars.
said they are still the best, yes. Yeah.
Does this surprise either of you in terms of I mean, look, this is not scientific by any means, but does this, I mean, and it is worldwide, but does this reflect what you also observe in terms of people's feelings regarding German vehicles and then the competition out there, whether Japanese, Chinese, or American?
I'm not so worried about that the Germans in near future still can make it, because engineering in Germany is still very strong, especially cars. What worries me is the speed, how this all happening. And this is what the polls also shows. I think a few years before that, at least, if we asked the German audience, none of them would have said we buy a Chinese car, probably under 5%. Now the numbers probably are much higher, because people realize how fast the development in China is going, battery and digitalization software. And this, I'm not sure if the Germans can make it in the next 2-3 years. And this is it's for German engineers, this is a very short time. In the Chinese car development, it is a long time. A lot of things has happening in this very short time.
I think also, I mean, it's not that long ago that then Chancellor Merkel was saying that the internet was unknown territory, and this is part of it. You know, the fact that Germany hasn't really excelled in engineering in tech engineering, it has in traditional engineering forms. So that side really needs to come on, and that's going to mean a lot more collaboration, presumably with the US.
Yeah.
And so you need to keep relations good with the US. So all of these things kind of feed into each other ultimately. I mean, I think it is. The German car industry is one of the wonders of the world, but it's really, it thinks it's sat on its laurels. It thinks that just because it's got this legacy that it'll help it survive. But it's a really fast-moving world now, and it's really struggling.
And Jahangir Alam had actually asked this question: could we discuss how German companies can regain their positions? Can they get more government help in the process? Where you said that they've got to make better relations with the US, but it's going to be difficult because they're slow.
They have to probably do both. They have to have good relationship with the US tech companies, and that's why we're not only talking about China. The US is. They also were lacking behind, but with the Biden years, the US speeded up so much, and of course, software-wise, the US were always strong. But I think there is also no alternative than work together with Chinese companies, and this is what's already happening to some part, but it probably has to be more.
Well, I think my takeaway is that Clifford and Felix should run these German automakers and save them.
I'm not sure if I...
Yeah, we're going to set up a consultancy.
Make a fortune.
Neha, I don't know if you have any thoughts from listening to all of this.
Well, I'm entirely baffled that you told us that BYD has so many gadgets in its cars, like a karaoke machine.
Also, they also you can play video games, not as the driver, but the passengers, right?
Some husbands use it as a living room when they had fights with the family. They go into the car and say, "Okay, this is my living room."
And it's on social media, right? And you can see it.
I've got no comment to that. Well, I'm going to end with actually 2 comments. EO says German cars are doomed, and Peter Sobzek said German cars are the best. So that is how I am going to end on my thoughts. Not my thoughts, but your thoughts. So thank you very much for everybody who's put in all your questions and your comments. Have been many, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to all of them.
It's been a super lively chat today from those tuning in online. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really grateful, and we hope you learned a thing or two. Thank you, Felix Lee. Thank you so much to Clifford Coonan, our brain trust here. We're so glad that you were able to join us, and I've definitely learned a lot.
And do join us again next week. You should know what we're going to talk about around about 24 hours before. It will be on our YouTube community tab, so on that platform. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much again to everyone who's commented and put questions to our guests.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Bye.